Elijah Monroe was 37 years old, and for 8 years he had let his wife believe she was the engine of their household while he quietly carried the load nobody saw. He worked as a logistics coordinator for a freight company outside Memphis. He drove a 2012 Tahoe with a cracked dashboard. He brought home $4,200 a month after taxes, and his wife Mariella complained about every dollar of it. She told her cousins he was going nowhere. She told her hairdresser he had no ambition. She told her mother, loud enough for him to hear from the next room, that she had wasted her best years on a man who would never amount to anything. On a Tuesday morning in early September, in a small law office off Poplar Avenue, Mariella Monroe signed her name on a stack of divorce papers and laughed out loud at the part where she would walk away with the house, the savings account, and half of whatever pitiful pension Elijah had managed to scrape together over the years. She did not know that Elijah's father, a man she had met exactly twice and dismissed as a quiet country mechanic from outside Tupelo, had died 11 days earlier and left his only son a portfolio of farmland, mineral rights, and a private logistics holding company valued at a confirmed $300 million. She did not know that the lawyer sitting across from her, an older woman named Felicia Brennan, was not in fact a neutral mediator, but a senior partner from a Nashville firm Elijah had retained the day after the funeral. She did not know that the man she had spent 8 years calling a loser had spent the last 6 weeks reviewing every document she signed, and that her laughter that morning was being recorded by the camera mounted above the bookshelf behind her. What Mariella never thought to ask, not once in 8 years of marriage, was why a man with no ambition had a father who showed up to their wedding in a 30-year-old work truck and called himself a country mechanic, when he was in fact something else entirely. She was about to find out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light filtered through the warped blinds of the small bungalow on Larchmont Street, settling on the kitchen table where Elijah Monroe sat with a cup of black coffee and a manila envelope he had not yet opened. The house was quiet. Mariella had left for work an hour earlier without saying goodbye, the way she had been leaving for the better part of 2 years. The radiator ticked in the hallway. The faucet dripped the way it had dripped since the spring, because Mariella would not let him spend the $40 on the part, saying they could not afford it, while wearing earrings that cost 6 times that. Elijah turned the envelope over in his hands. His father had sent it 3 weeks before his heart gave out on the porch of the farmhouse outside Tupelo. The return address was in his father's blocky handwriting, the same hand that had written every birthday card Elijah had ever received. He had not opened it yet because his father had told him on the phone, "Son, that one is for when you need it. Don't open it before. You'll know." His father, Cornelius Monroe, had been a man of few words and fewer explanations. He had raised Elijah alone after Elijah's mother passed when the boy was 9. He had taught him how to change an alternator, how to read a contract, how to keep his mouth shut when other men were running theirs. Cornelius used to say, "Money you talk about gets borrowed. Money you don't talk about gets built." Elijah had carried that line into every paycheck he had ever cashed. He thought of the day he met Mariella. She had been working the register at a feed store outside Olive Branch, where Elijah had stopped to pick up fence posts for his father. She had smiled at him and asked if he was the one buying, or just the muscle. He had laughed. They had gone to dinner that Friday. She had been bright and quick then, full of plans, and he had thought he had found a woman who wanted to build something with him. He had married her at the courthouse with his father standing as witness in a clean blue shirt and pressed slacks, and Cornelius had pulled him aside afterward and said quietly, "I hope she grows toward you, son, and not away from you." Elijah had told his father not to worry. Cornelius had nodded and not said anything else, the way he never said anything else when he already knew the shape of how a thing was going to go. Mariella had grown away. By the 3rd year, she was complaining about the house. By the 5th, she was complaining about him. By the 7th, she had stopped pretending. Elijah had watched it happen the way you watch weather coming in off the river. Slow and certain, and he had said nothing, because his father had also told him, when a person is telling you who they are, the kindest thing you can do is listen. He listened. He kept working. He kept his other phone, the older flip model his father had given him years ago, secured in the inner pocket of his work jacket where Mariella had never thought to look. Cornelius had been the only number programmed into it. Now the number belonged to a woman named Felicia Brennan, whose name Elijah had not yet had to use. His regular phone buzzed. It was Mariella. She had sent a single text. We need to talk tonight. Bring your checkbook. He set the phone down. He looked at the manila envelope. He did not open it yet. He finished his coffee. He went to work. That evening, Mariella was waiting for him at the kitchen table with a folder. She had done her hair. She had put on lipstick. She had the small, triumphant look she got when she believed she had outmaneuvered someone. She slid the folder across the table. It was divorce papers, drawn up by an attorney Elijah had never heard of, a man named Bradley Hatcher, who worked out of a strip mall office in Bartlett. Mariella had been working with him for 4 months. She told Elijah this with a small, satisfied smile, as if the duration was itself a victory. She said, I want the house, the savings, the Tahoe is yours, and you can keep whatever raggedy pension you've got. She said, I'm done pretending, Elijah. I want a real life. I want a man who's going somewhere. She said his name the way you say the name of a brand you have stopped using. Elijah looked at the papers. He looked at her. His face did not move. He said, Can I have a few days to review? She laughed. She said, Take a week if you need to, baby, but it's happening either way. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the spare bedroom he used as a workshop, the one Mariella called his junk room, and he opened the manila envelope from his father. Inside was a single typed page, a key on a small brass ring, and a folded letter in his father's handwriting. The letter said, Son, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I am sorry I did not get to tell you in person what I am about to tell you on paper. The mechanic shop was never the whole story. Your grandfather started a company in 1962 that I have run quietly for 41 years. It owns 14,000 acres of farmland in 3 states, mineral rights on most of it, a logistics network that moves agricultural freight from the Delta up through the Ohio Valley, and a small bank in Greenville that we acquired in 1989. The total, last appraised in March, is just over $300 million. It is yours now. I did not tell you while I was living because I wanted to see who married you for you and who married you for the name. I think you already know which one Mariella was. The key is to a safety deposit box at First Tennessee in downtown Memphis. The papers in there will introduce you to Felicia Brennan. She has been expecting your call for 2 years. Don't be angry with me, son. I was protecting you the only way I knew. Love your father. Elijah read the letter 3 times. His hands did not shake. His father had been right. His father had been right about all of it. He folded the letter back into the envelope. He put the brass key in his pocket. He went into the bedroom where Mariella was already asleep, the divorce papers still on her nightstand like a trophy. He stood in the doorway and looked at her for a long moment. He did not feel anger. He felt the same quiet clarity his father used to get when a customer brought in a car with 3 problems and only knew about 1. You started at the beginning. You did not skip steps. The next morning, he called the number on the typed page. Felicia Brennan answered on the second ring, as if she had been waiting beside the phone. She said, Miss Monroe, I am very sorry for your loss. Your father was a remarkable client and a finer man. I can be in Memphis by 2 this afternoon. Can you meet me at the First Tennessee branch on Madison? Elijah said yes. He told Mariella he had a delivery run to Jackson. She did not look up from her phone. Felicia Brennan was 64 years old, silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit, and carried a leather briefcase that looked older than Elijah. She met him in a private room at the bank. She had 3 folders ready. The first was the corporate structure of Monroe Holdings ILC, with its 14 subsidiaries. Board structure and Elijah's name typed as sole heir and incoming chairman. The second was a forensic review of Mariella's finances that Cornelius had quietly commissioned 16 months earlier through a private firm in Nashville. The third was the divorce filing Bradley Hatcher had drafted, which Felicia had already obtained a copy of through perfectly legal channels she did not bother to explain. She set them down one by one. She said, Your father asked me, if this day came, to give you 3 pieces of information before you made any decision. First, the divorce papers your wife signed do not include any of the assets in Monroe Holdings, because none of them were in your name during the marriage, and Tennessee law is clear on inherited and separately held property. Second, your wife has been moving money. She set down a printout. $46,000 over 22 months, withdrawn in amounts small enough to stay under the radar, deposited into an account at a credit union in her sister's name. Third, your wife's attorney, Bradley Hatcher, is currently under review by the Tennessee Bar for ethics violations stemming from a prior client whose husband he encouraged to sign documents under similar circumstances. The review has not been made public yet. It will be by November. Felicia let that sit. Then she said, "Miss Monroe, you have options. Your father's preference, expressed to me directly, was that you allow the divorce to proceed exactly as your wife has structured it, with one adjustment." Elijah said, "What adjustment?" Felicia smiled for the first time. She said the signing should be filmed. 3 days later, Mariella told him she had scheduled the signing for the following Tuesday at Hatcher's office. Elijah said that was fine. He asked if she would mind doing it at a neutral location instead, a small office off Poplar that a coworker had recommended. He said it gently, in the same flat tone he used about everything. Mariella laughed and said, "Baby, I don't care where we do it, as long as we do it." He said good. He told Felicia that night. Felicia said, "The office is already booked. I will be sitting in as the notary. There will be a camera. Your wife will sign every page. We will not say a word that would alert her. She will hand you the pen herself." Elijah went home and ate dinner with his wife. She made spaghetti from a jar. She talked about the apartment she was going to lease after the divorce, a nice one in Germantown with a pool. She said, "I might even take a little trip, treat myself." He nodded. He told her the spaghetti was good. He washed the dishes. He went into his junk room and sat with the photograph of his father he kept on the small desk. He said quietly, "You were right, Pop, about all of it." He sat there for a long time. On the Saturday before the signing, he drove out to Tupelo to see his Aunt Mildred, his father's older sister, who lived alone in the farmhouse now and who had known about the company since 1971. She was 81 years old, sharp as a fence wire, and had been waiting for him since the funeral. She poured him sweet tea on the back porch and listened to him explain everything Felicia had said. When he was done, she set her glass on the railing and said, "Baby, your daddy used to tell me. The woman who laughs at a man is the woman who already buried him in her own mind. You let her keep laughing till the laugh runs out. Then you stand up." She kissed his forehead. She sent him home with a jar of preserves and a small wooden box that had belonged to his grandfather. Inside the box was his grandfather's pocket watch and a folded note from his father that said simply, "You are ready." Son, Tuesday morning came. The office off Poplar had a small conference room with a polished table and a window that overlooked a parking lot. Felicia was there in her charcoal suit. A young paralegal sat at the side with a stack of forms. The camera above the bookshelf was on, and Mariella never noticed it because she had walked in radiant in a new dress, smelling of perfume she had bought with the $46,000 she thought no one was tracking. She sat down. Felicia placed the papers in front of her. Mariella picked up the pen Elijah handed her. She looked at him and said, "No hard feelings, baby," he said. "None at all." She signed page 1. She signed page 2. By page 4, she was laughing, a small, bubbling laugh, and she said to the paralegal, "You know what? I told my mama this man was never going to amount to anything. And here we are. Here we finally are." She signed page 5. She signed page 6. She handed the pen back to Elijah with a flourish. The papers were complete. Felicia stamped them. The notary work was done. Mariella stood up. She said, "I'll be out of the house by Friday, baby. You can have it. It was always too small for me anyway." She walked out of the office still laughing. The door closed behind her. Elijah looked at Felicia. Felicia looked at him. She said, "The recording is preserved. The divorce is final. The next step is yours." Elijah said, "Set the meeting for Friday." Friday afternoon, Mariella was loading the last of her boxes into a rented U-Haul in the driveway of the bungalow on Larchmont when a black Suburban pulled up at the curb. Behind it came a second Suburban. Behind that, a town car. Felicia Brennan stepped out of the town car in her charcoal suit. Behind her came 2 members of the Monroe Holdings legal team, an older black gentleman named Reginald Pike, who had been Cornelius's personal attorney for 28 years, and a forensic accountant named Marcus Devereaux. Mariella stopped with a box of shoes in her hands. She said, "What is this?" Elijah came out of the house in a clean blue shirt and pressed slacks, the kind of clothes his father used to wear to court. He said, "Mariella, I want you to meet some people who worked with my father." She set the box down slowly. They sat at the kitchen table she had just emptied. Felicia opened the first folder. She slid it across. It was the corporate structure of Monroe Holdings, with the valuation typed in bold at the top of page 1. $300 million. Mariella's eyes did not move for a full 8 seconds. Felicia slid the second folder. It contained the forensic report on the $46,000 Mariella had moved, the credit union account in her sister's name, every transfer date. The third folder was the file on Bradley Hatcher, including the pending bar review and the prior client whose husband had been induced to sign under near-identical circumstances. Reginald Pike spoke next. He said, "Ma'am, the divorce you signed Tuesday is final and binding. We have no intention of contesting it. You may keep the house, which is appraised at $164,000, and the savings account, which contains $11,400. You may keep the Tahoe. You will not be receiving anything from Monroe Holdings, because Tennessee law is clear that inherited property held separately is not subject to division, and your husband's interest in the company did not vest until 11 days before you signed." Felicia added, however, the $46,000 you transferred during the marriage is marital property, and we will be filing a civil action Monday morning for its return, along with documented attorney fees. Marcus Devereaux added, "Your attorney, Mr. Hatcher, is unlikely to be in a position to represent you by the end of the month." Mariella tried. She opened her mouth. She said, "Elijah, baby, I didn't know. I would have. You have to understand." Aunt Mildred had told him this would happen. Felicia had told him this would happen. He had prepared for it. But it was Reginald Pike who spoke before Elijah had to. Reginald was 70 years old and had known Cornelius for 38 years. He said, "Ma'am, we have a 47-minute recording of you signing the papers and explaining, in your own words, why your husband deserved to lose everything. We have your laughter on tape. We have the bank records. There is no version of this conversation where you come out as the wronged party. I would advise you to stop speaking." Mariella stopped speaking. Elijah stood up. He looked at her one last time, the woman he had loved at 26 and watched grow away from him for 11 years. He did not feel anger. He felt only the quiet clarity his father had carried for 41 years while running an empire she had been too dismissive to notice. He said, "You signed those papers laughing. I want you to remember that laugh, because that was the sound of you choosing this." He picked up his folder. He said, "The keys to the house are on the counter. Be out by Sunday." He walked past her, past the U-Haul, past the Suburbans, and got into the town car Felicia had brought. The door closed behind him with a soft, expensive sound. 10 months had passed like water. Elijah stood on the front porch of the farmhouse outside Tupelo, the one his father had built with his own hands in 1974, and watched the morning come up over the fields. He had moved in 3 months after the divorce, after closing the bungalow in Memphis and donating most of the furniture. He had kept his grandfather's pocket watch on the dresser. He had kept his father's blue shirt in the closet. He held a mug of black coffee in both hands. The fields were green with new soybean. A combine was working the far edge of the western parcel. One of 14 Monroe Holdings owned outright. He had taken the chairman's seat in November. He had spent the winter learning the company beside Reginald Pike, who came down from Nashville twice a week. He had not changed much. He had raised the wages of the warehouse workers in Greenville. He had funded a scholarship in his father's name at the community college outside Tupelo. He had bought Aunt Mildred a new refrigerator she had refused for 6 years. There was a woman inside the farmhouse, a veterinarian named Celeste Avery, who had a practice in Oxford and who had come out to the farm in February to look at a horse Cornelius had left behind. She had asked Elijah good questions about his father. She had not asked him about the company. She had asked him about the man. He had told her, slowly, over months, and she had listened the way his father used to listen, which was to say entirely she was making breakfast now. He could hear her humming through the screen door. Mariella was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Fraser, working as a receptionist at a chiropractor's office that paid $14 an hour, because the $46. 0-0 civil judgment had wiped out her savings, and the house on Larchmont had sold in a hurry for less than appraisal. Bradley Hatcher had been disbarred in early December. Her sister had stopped speaking to her after Aunt Mildred had called and explained, in calm detail, what Mariella had done. Her mother had moved in with her cousin in Little Rock and would not return her calls. Elijah heard about these things in passing, the way you hear about a town you have driven through but never lived in. He noted them. He went back to his coffee. Celeste opened the screen door and asked if he wanted his eggs scrambled or over easy. He said scrambled. She smiled and went back inside. He stood on the porch a little longer, thinking about the manila envelope and the brass key, and the man in the blue shirt who had stood as his witness at the courthouse and known even then the shape of how a thing was going to go. He thought about Mariella signing those papers, laughing, certain she had won. He felt no anger about it anymore. He felt only the quiet a man feels when he is finally standing on land his father stood on. In a life his father built him toward, with a woman who had asked about the man and not the money. He drank the last of his coffee. He went inside to have breakfast. Some things, he thought, were worth the patience to wait for. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.